As the D8 summit unfolds in Egypt, leaders focus on empowering youth, boosting trade, and advancing sustainable development. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi calls for stronger cooperation and increased investment, marking a pivotal moment for the region's future. Meanwhile, tensions escalate across the Middle East, with Israel intensifying its military presence in Gaza and Syria. With evacuation orders from Gaza and ongoing operations on Jebel el-Sheikh, the region braces for further instability. Now, the Russia-Ukraine conflict continues to reshape global dynamics, with escalating military actions and economic consequences. The situation remains critical as international efforts to mediate peace face significant challenges. But for now, let's start with Egypt's leadership of the D8 summit in Cairo. Welcome to In Focus. Aram Online has reported that President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi inaugurated the 11th D8 summit in Cairo, marking Egypt's presidency for the organization until 2025. The summit, attended by leaders of Bangladesh, Indonesia, Iran, Malaysia, Nigeria, Pakistan, and Turkey, focuses on economic cooperation and development. The summit's discussions also address critical regional issues, including the ongoing crises in Gaza, Lebanon, and Syria, with a special session on Palestine and Lebanon. Egypt's foreign minister emphasized the need for enhanced cooperation to address global economic challenges and regional instability. Egypt's trade with D8 countries reached $5.9 billion in 2024, with Turkey being the top importer. Investments from D8 nations in Egypt also saw a 6.2% increase, showcasing strengthened economic ties with the group. Now, providing more analysis about the most recent updates on the 11th D8 summit in Cairo, we're joined from Cairo by Dr. Bilal Shaib, an economic professor. Good evening to you, sir, and welcome to Qnews. And we start with, how do you assess Egypt's leadership for the D8 summit and its role in advancing economic cooperation among those developing nations?
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. In fact, the D8, from its name, it is a symposium or an organization comprising developing countries. In fact, the power of this summit is represented by the 1.2 billion individuals comprising the population of the member states, which actually comprise around 15% of the total global population as well. They represent 14%. These member states represent 14% of the total global trade. And so these member states, these 8 member states, in fact, have a great economic stature. In fact, the summit aims to scale investments between the member states and to scale economic growth in the 8 member states. And we have countries like Bangladesh, Turkey, and Egypt that give due care to SMEs. And as well, these SMEs have the ability to attract and galvanize large figures of workforce, which definitely can reflect positively on the GDP of these member states. So regarding Egypt, Egypt has great economic and cooperation and trade exchange with these 8 member states, or the 7 member states. In fact, our trade with the 7 member states is actually 58% billion dollars, and in fact we export to Turkey alone with $2 billion. In fact, we import as well from the 7 member states with a figure of $3 billion. Of course, most of them come from Turkey, but what I'm trying to say is a summit like the D8 summit can definitely scale trade exchange between Egypt and the member states of the D8. Specifically, that Egypt, in fact, is a member of other economic blocs like the G8 or the D8 and others, in fact.
Yes. Now, with Egypt's presidency focusing on empowering youth, we've seen the theme today. Now, how can the D8 summit catalyze sustainable development in those member states?
Most definitely regarding SMEs, there are a lot of things we can say. Like, for instance, Bangladesh has a great expertise under the leadership of Dr. Mohamed Yunus, who in fact has done a doctoral thesis on decreasing Bangladesh or poverty levels in Bangladesh. And when Dr. Yunus, in fact, came back to his country after he received his doctoral degree, he established the Grameen Bank, which, in fact, played a major role in lending provider women in the country, which actually, of course, increased employment levels in the country. In fact, SMEs are quite viable, specifically in population-dense countries. Like in these countries, like in one of the countries, we have Nigeria. The population over there is mostly youth, and the total population of these member states is 1.2 billion individuals, which, as I have said before, a great number. In fact, a country as well like Malaysia pays due care to SMEs, and Egypt is a leading country when it comes to fostering SMEs. And in fact, there is an advisor to the Prime Minister that is in charge of the subject of entrepreneurship. And through his mandate, he doesn't just provide financial institutions, but there are other non-financial institutions, like, for instance, facilitating the issuance of licenses and documentations for SME entities led by youth entrepreneurs. In fact, SMEs are the cornerstone on which major economies can predicate upon. Here we have Japan as an example, India as an example of countries that have built their entire economies on the power and the influence of SMEs as well. There are a lot of production sectors that were discussed in the summit, like Indonesia and Malaysia, for instance, who discussed agriculture elaboratively. In fact, in Egypt, we had an agricultural acreage of 9.3 million acres, and Egypt increased this figure by 3 additional million acres, which of course decreased poverty levels in the country.
Right. Now, to another area, the political one, and given the challenges in the Middle East, particularly in Gaza and Syria. Now, how significant were those special sessions on Palestine and Lebanon for the D8 diplomatic efforts? And how do you assess the speeches that were made today by the presidents? And definitely, how would the world perceive the messages given in those speeches?
In fact, the summit is right now being held in tumultuous juncture in the region, whether in Syria, in Gaza, or in Lebanon. And so we have seen President Abdel Fattah Sisi and President Erdogan speaking elaboratively on the dichotomous measures held by a lot of the major countries in the international community. You know, the war in Palestine has exceeded 400 days right now. We have around 109 million displaced persons and refugees. And because of these wars, and 70% of the infrastructure in Gaza has been completely demolished. And of course, Lebanon needs around $5 million in order to restore its infrastructure.
Indeed, Dr. Belal, what is happening in Syria and in Gaza is totally unacceptable, and that was clearly said by the leaders today in the D8 summit. That was Dr. Belal Shaib, an economic professor from Cairo. We thank you so much for your insights. And to our next topic, and our next topic takes us many miles east of Cairo, where is Israel intensifying its military presence in Gaza and Syria. Amid Israel's evacuation orders for Gaza and ongoing operations on Jebel el-Sheikh, the region is bracing for further instability, all the while international efforts for reconstruction in Syria are growing as power dynamics shift. The New York Times has reported that in Syria, former Assad regime soldiers are seeking amnesty as the new transitional government led by Hayat Tahrir al-Sham consolidates power. Hundreds gathered in Latakia at a reconciliation center, eager to sever ties with the ousted regime and secure their future. The government has promised amnesty to rank and file conscripts, while pursuing senior officials involved in regime abuses. The process remains unclear, and many hope this initiative will offer them a chance for redemption. The gathering in Latakia marks a crucial step in Syria's shifting power dynamics as citizens and former soldiers seek to reconcile with a new authority. Providing more analysis about the most recent updates on tensions in the Middle East, we're joined from California by Dr. Ashraf Singer, a world politics analyst. We welcome you in on Qnews. And how do you assess Israel's continued military presence in Syria, particularly in Jebel el-Sheikh?
It's still very clear that Israel is taking huge steps to occupy more lands from Syria. And this is very crucial for the stability in the Middle East. It's not only the internal, movement in Syria, but we need really to see what is going on from Turkey, from Israel. Israel, it's clear. It's giving a hint that Israel this is shaking the status quo before fall down of the Assad regime, and that shaking of status quo never ever will serve the interest of the UN and the international community to keep Syria in that smooth transitions as long as Israel is invading or capturing new lands from Syria. This is not right. Of course, the international community condemned, the Israelis' actions. Israelis announced many times they will stay for a short period, but it seems to me that period will not be short. It's gonna to Israel gonna to stay more than a year or probably more. We don't know because Israel till now didn't really identify it is the territory with its neighbors, and it's still opening. It is military operation in different direction. All of these actions never ever help Syria or help Palestinians or help Lebanon. We need really to put too much pressure on Israel to stop that kind of irrational actions by its leader.
Now, turning to another area, which is Gaza, what could be the implications of Israel's new Gaza evacuation orders for regional stability?
This is you know, I would say the Israelis, moved probably more than 90% of Gazans from North Gaza to South Gaza. So if if we can really put kind of assessment, what does mean that kind of displacement of people of Gaza? This is not right. Basically, Israel's declared many times that North Gaza will and continue to be a major threat to the Israel security. But in fact, Israel created that 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 kind of danger situation by pushing Gazans and punish Gazans, people by all the means and all the tools like the military strikes or even preventing people to move freely inside Gaza. Of course, to get that access to the humanitarians aids will not really work perfectly in Gaza because of that kind of decision every time moving people from north to south, south to north. Until now, we don't understand what is the end of it is, end the plan of the Israelis. Uh, what I heard from the news, like the retired generals, the Israelis retired generals, they were proposing a plan to move people from North Gaza to South Gaza and let that area is very clear from people. But if you really look at the map, you will see that the Gaza Strip is very tiny place, to absorb 2.3 million Palestinians. Imagine if you're really moving, these guys from North Gaza to South Gaza in like the half of the territory of the Gaza Strip. Means a chaos and pushing people to be in a very tiny place and how we really can manage, their life and even now Gaza is out of work, is out of work at the territory, at a functional place, to let people, live. Israel destroyed, all the hospitals, the schools, universities. So it seems to me now we are really facing a crucial situation in Gaza. This is why the UN and many voices, declared their concern about what is going on in Gaza. And it seems to me like, European Union, Russia, United States, all of them, they are watching, just watch, not really active. This
Right.
is major threats
In,
to
in, in,
the Gaza's people.
Indeed, Dr. Ashraf, the situation in the Palestinian occupied territories is horrific, and all the areas are devastated. And indeed, we are in need to see a position now. That was Dr. Ashraf Singer, a world politics analyst from California. Thank you so much for your insights. And turning to our next topic, and as tensions escalate on the front lines of the Russia-Ukraine war, recent developments signal a turning point in the conflict. Let us analyze the latest battlefield updates and their broader implications, uncovering what they mean for the region's future and the global balance of power. Voice of America has reported on Russian President Vladimir Putin's announcing progress towards achieving key objectives in the Russo-Ukraine conflict. Speaking during his annual address, he highlighted advancements by Russian forces along the battlefront, noting daily territorial gains. Putin also praised the heroic efforts of Russian fighters and reiterated the complexity of ongoing operations. Addressing military developments, he showcased the capabilities of the Orshnik hypersonic missile and claimed it was invincible against Western defense systems. Putin proposed a high-tech experiment to test these claims, but questioned whether Western nations would accept such a challenge. Providing more analysis about the most recent updates in Russia-Ukraine conflict, we're joined from Moscow by Dr. Asif Milham, the director of the GSM Research Center. Good evening to you, sir, and welcome to Qnews. Now, Russia has accused Ukraine of using white phosphorus. What evidence has been presented to support these claims?
Greetings, everybody. In fact, this is not the first time Russia accuses Ukraine of using white phosphorus. There were videos that were disseminated during this conflict, whether in Yakhmut or in other cities, that prove or that actually show that white phosphorus might have been used. But there has to be a neutral investigation committee in order to look into this subject with bias and professionalism.
Now, if those claims were proved, how might the accusations regarding the use of white phosphorus affect Ukraine's relations with the international community, particularly its allies?
Madam, in my calibration, Ukraine unfortunately is being used as a tool to confront Russia. And so we can say that Russia is well backed by Western countries, on top of which, of course, is the United States. There is some news that Ukraine used some smoke bombs and chemical smoke bombs in Kursk that actually lead to cases of apnea and suffocation among the population. But the West didn't move. In fact, the West only moves when it has an interest to do so. And so Ukraine now finds or might find itself in a legal predicament with legal courts or tribunals. But once more, the crisis is not going to be so tightened for Ukraine, because these entities, these legal entities, are actually under the control of Western countries that back Ukraine up.
Now, President Putin has stressed that any bilateral agreements would have to be signed with legitimate Ukrainian authorities. How does this affect the potential for dialogue between both countries?
In my own calibration, in fact, no negotiations can be done anymore between the two countries. After Igor Klirik, in fact, the chief of radioactive and chemical and biological protection department, in fact, this puts an end to even the potentiality of a negotiation happening. You know, the statement that you just mentioned, in fact, regarding the statement before the assassination of Krieging, we found some ascension or escalation in the statements between the two parties. But later on, it seemed that Ukraine didn't want to have any dialogue at all. And right now, Putin is claiming that the current authorities in power in Ukraine right now are illegitimate. He is deeming them all illegitimate. In fact, the respite ended like 15 years ago, and no elections, no legitimate elections have been done, and there is now a lot of dispute inside of Ukraine regarding the legitimacy of Zelensky as a president.
Very clear what you're saying here. Dr. Asif Milham, the director of the GSM Research Center from Moscow, thank you so much for your insights, and I guess that brings us to the end of today's episode for In Focus. Many thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more updates on Qnews.